These are some morbid facts that you didn't know about Adolf Hitler. Before his rise to power, Hitler escaped death numerous times. When he was 4 years old, a priest saved him from drowning in a freezing cold river. While fighting in World War I, he was spared by a British soldier who aimed in and realized that the wounded German would be no threat. In 1924, Hitler was arrested for high treason, the punishment for which was typically execution. However, the judge let him live since he believed that Hitler had good intentions. In 1938, Hitler was Time magazine's Person of the Year, and the year after that, he was nominated for a Nobel Peace Prize. While his actions during the war were nothing short of horrific, some of his post-war plans went even further. Hitler planned on collecting millions of Jewish artifacts to build a museum of an extinct race. And if the Axis powers won, he planned on declaring war against his Japanese allies in a final showdown. Here are some morbid facts about Jeffrey Dahmer. When Dahmer became obsessed with animal corpses by the age of 4, his chemist father was proud that Jeffrey appeared to have found a scientific passion. So he showed his son how to properly clean and preserve animal bones using bleach, the methods for which Dahmer would eventually use on humans. To keep them under his control, Dahmer not only drugged his victims, but even attempted to turn some of them into sex zombies. He would drill holes into their heads and pour hydrochloric acid inside while they were still alive. Ultimately, these attempts failed and resulted in many horrific deaths. When police finally investigated Dahmer's apartment, the scene was so horrific that the chief examiner said it was more like dismantling a museum than an actual crime scene. It was so full of mangled corpses that Dahmer ran out of room and had to store one in his bathtub, meaning he had been showering over a dead corpse every morning. These are some of the craziest prison escapes of all time. Stephen Russell escaped prison by using laxatives to fake the symptoms of AIDS. He then called the prison posing as a doctor and asked for any prisoners interested in experimental treatment for AIDS. Russell volunteered himself, and once he was out of Texas, he sent a death certificate to the prison stating that he had died. Choi Gap-bok escaped by squeezing his body through the food slot at the bottom of his cell door. Choi was a yoga practitioner who applied skin ointment to slip through the tiny slot measuring 6 inches tall and 12 inches wide. In 1980, autistic savant Mark DeFriest was sentenced to 4 years in prison on charges that were basically nonsense. However, his original sentence has since developed into 34 years after 7 successful prison escapes. DeFriest could replicate any key by memorizing the pattern and reconstructing them out of anything available. These are some items people kept for years until they realized their true value. Lauren Kreitzer was broke, depressed, and disabled after losing his leg in a car accident in 2007. But one day, he saw a blanket valued at $500,000 on Antiques Roadshow and realized he had the exact same blanket. It was a Navajo blanket from the 1800s that he ended up selling for $1.5 million and quickly turned his life around. In 2016, a man in China realized that the long-handled object he had been using to crack open walnuts for 25 years was actually a live stick grenade. He didn't receive much for it, but getting rid of it might have saved his life. When a Filipino fisherman's anchor got stuck on a rock, he decided to take it home with him as a good luck charm. He kept it under his bed for 10 years until his house burned down in a fire. He soon found out that it was actually the largest pearl ever found and was valued at right around $100 million. These are some people who have real-life superpowers. A girl named Olivia Farnsworth is the only known case of chromosome 6 deletion. She doesn't feel pain, hunger, or the need to sleep. She was once hit by a car and dragged nearly 100 feet, but she felt no pain and emerged with only minor injuries. A man from Texas suffers from an extremely rare condition known as autobrewery syndrome. His body can ferment the carbs he consumes into alcohol, effectively getting him drunk off of food. Artist Stephen Wiltshire is an autistic savant known for his incredible photographic memory. He once drew the entire New York City skyline after nothing but a 20-minute helicopter ride over the city. A blind man named Daniel Kish has learned to use echolocation by clicking his tongue and listening to the echoes. He can safely ride his bike in traffic, differentiate specific kinds of cars, and sense a building from 1,000 feet away. Morbid facts. In 1979, the King of Persia ordered the execution of 2 servants for being too loud. But since it was a holiday, he postponed their executions by 1 day and made the servants return to their duties. That night, they assassinated the king in his sleep. The FBI estimates that there are between 25 and 50 active serial killers in the US at any given time. When a person is executed by electric chair, they feel everything. They are fully aware of their bodies being fried as it happens in real time. One inmate who survived the first round of electrocution said it tasted exactly like cold peanut butter. A Japanese schoolgirl once died because a teacher crushed her head in the school gate. The principal said it was the student's fault because the gate had to be closed at exactly 8:30 and she was late. 5 hours before he was confirmed to be dead, somebody posted about Michael Jackson's death on Wikipedia with nearly exact details. No one paid attention because everyone thought it was just a prank, so no details about the original poster were ever found. While masks may save human lives, the same can't be said for wildlife. In 2020 alone, an estimated 1.5 billion masks ended up in our oceans. A British teenager was arrested after beating and stabbing 2 girls because they called him Harry Potter. In 2009, a man sued Pepsi when he was traumatized after finding a mouse in his Mountain Dew. But Pepsi attorneys said this was impossible since Mountain Dew would completely dissolve a mouse in 30 days. Pepsi won the case upon showing that the can was purchased 74 days after it was manufactured. In 2013, 8-year-old Gabriel Fernandez was brutally murdered by his mother and her boyfriend after he failed to clean his room. In the 8 months prior, he was subject to horrific torture which included regular beatings, being shot in the face with a BB gun, and being pepper sprayed. Just a few days before he was murdered, he wrote a card to his mom telling her all the things that he loved about her. Just minutes after this photo was taken, this heroic puppy died from the venom of the cobra he killed. Though he was in pain from the venom, he smiled knowing that he prevented the dangerous snake from entering his family's home. In 1996, a man from Texas was bitten by the highly venomous coral snake. But instead of panicking, he killed the snake by biting off its head before using the snake's decapitated body as a tourniquet. Venezuelan serial killer Duranhel Vargas confessed to killing and eating at least 10 individuals, but he claimed he never ate fat people because he thought they had too much cholesterol. A British bomb detection dog named Theo died from stress a few hours after watching his handler get shot. The pair had set a record for bomb detection, and the dog was posthumously awarded an honor equivalent to the Victorian Cross. In 2019, a Spanish woman gave her neighbor a box full of sex toys to hold on to. 6 months later, the neighbor noticed a horrible stench coming from the box. She finally opened it and found a decomposing severed head. It was the head of the original woman's husband. In 1977, Bob Marley was diagnosed with skin cancer on his toe and was told that having it amputated would stop the spread. But he refused the surgery since his Rastafarian religion saw amputation as a sin. By summer of 1980, the cancer had metastasized throughout Marley's entire body, and he died soon afterwards. When 2-year-old Rosalia Lombardo died from the Spanish flu in 1920, her grieving father insisted on her being preserved. Known as the Sleeping Beauty, she was one of the last to be buried in Sicily's Capuchin catacombs. This photo was taken in 1982, 62 years after she died. In the year 2000, a partially paralyzed old man was in his outhouse when the floor suddenly collapsed. He fell through and was immediately surrounded by excrement, spiders, maggots, and rats. He was stuck for more than 3 days until his mailman thankfully found him. The death of Metallica singer James Hetfield's mom inspired him to write the song The God That Failed. She died when he was 16 due to Christian beliefs influencing her to reject cancer treatment. In 1999, a waitress was tipped a lottery ticket and won $10 million. She was then sued by her colleagues for their share. Afterwards, she was sued by the man who tipped her the ticket. Then she was kidnapped by her ex-husband and ended up shooting him in the chest. Lastly, she went to court against the IRS for more than a decade before finally winning. In 1825, painter Samuel Morse received a letter which read that his wife was sick. The next day, he received a new letter which read that she had died. 2 days later, he went to see his wife one last time only to discover she had already been buried. Distraught over the slowness of long-distance communication, he invented the Morse code. These are some of the weirdest pets ever owned. Mark Dumas has a pet polar bear that purrs when he's around. They wrestle each other, swim together, and even sleep together. In Japan, there's a pet penguin named Lala. Every day, he walks into town wearing a backpack and collects fish from the local market. In the 1950s, a Texas businessman got a lion named Blondie as a family pet. She often gave rides to the kids and died of old age as a beloved member of the family. In 1989, a Costa Rican fisherman rescued a dying crocodile and they instantly became friends for life. The croc knew how to perform many tricks and even responded when his name was called. This is a photo of Salvador Dali taking his pet anteater for a stroll. A man from South Africa adopted a baby hippo after it was rescued from a river. 5 years later, the hippo dragged him into the same river and mauled him to death. Here are some morbid facts about Charles Manson. When Charles was born, his mother didn't even bother giving him a name. When doctors handed her the paper, she wrote no name, and Manson's birth certificate read no name Maddox until his death. After his mother spent 3 years in prison, she returned home and gave Charles a hug for the first and only time. Manson would later say that this hug was his only happy memory from his childhood. By the time he turned 32, Manson had spent nearly half his life behind bars. When he was released from prison in 1967, he requested to stay because he was afraid of adjusting to the outside world, as the prison had become his true home. Manson often gave his followers instructions on how to make the murders look like they were done by black people. When they murdered Gary Hinman in 1969, they drew a Black Panther paw on the wall using his blood. Manson apparently believed that this would spark an apocalyptic race war. These are some of the craziest world records that were set by accident. In 1945, a U.S. military plane accidentally crashed into the Empire State Building due to heavy fog. Among other damages, the plane severed the cables of an elevator while a woman was still inside. But Betty Oliver survived the 75-story plunge and still holds the record for the longest survived elevator fall. In 2013, a college kid at UVA nearly died after drinking an entire quart of soy sauce on a dare. He now holds the record for the highest blood sodium level ever recorded without brain damage. In 1972, flight attendant Vesna Volovich survived a 33,000-foot fall after an aircraft explosion. She now holds the Guinness World Record for the highest survived free fall without a parachute. These are some morbid facts that you didn't know about the Challenger explosion. NASA originally planned on sending Big Bird on the Challenger to get children interested in space travel. But the Big Bird suit was too big, so they ended up sending teacher Krista McAuliffe instead. Shortly after takeoff, the Challenger exploded while millions were watching live on CNN, including McAuliffe's entire school. One of the main engineers behind the rocket revealed that NASA ignored his warnings against launching in cold weather. The night before the launch, he told his wife, quote, "It's going to blow up." He was one of 5 engineers who voiced their concerns to NASA prior to the launch. Despite initial reports by NASA, the astronauts likely didn't die immediately from the blast. They might have spent the last 3 minutes of their lives consciously plummeting to Earth at 200 miles an hour. Weird war facts. While serving in the US military, Mr. T was ordered by a sergeant to chop down trees as a punishment. He ended up cutting down more than 70 trees in about 4 hours until a shocked major superseded the sergeant and ordered him to stop. In 1916, there was a proposed amendment to the US Constitution that would put all acts of war to a national vote. Anyone who voted yes would have to register as a volunteer for service in the US Army. The Battle of Normandy was so intense that about 4% of the sand at Normandy Beach is made up of broken down shrapnel from D-Day. To fight in World War I, a lot of young boys had lied about their age, but Serbian soldier Momcilo Gavric was easily the youngest. He was accepted into his unit at the age of 7 and was promoted to corporal by the time he turned 8. Here are some morbid facts about Joseph Stalin. During a Communist Party conference in 1937, Stalin was given a massive standing ovation. But no one wanted to be the first person to stop clapping out of fear of punishment. After 11 minutes, one man finally sat down and was promptly sent to the Gulag. Because of his father's harshness towards him, Stalin's first son shot himself but survived. After hearing about this, Stalin said he can't even shoot straight. When the Nazis captured his son during World War II, Stalin refused to make a trade for him and let them kill him. Stalin's guards were so afraid of him that no one called a doctor until 12 hours after he suffered a stroke. When they finally realized he was dying, his private physician was nowhere to be found. This was because he was already being tortured by the KGB for suggesting that Stalin required more bed rest. Morbidly wholesome. In 1981, a Turkish man shot Pope John Paul II 4 times but didn't kill him. After the Pope recovered, he visited the assassin in prison and gave him his forgiveness. The assassin was soon pardoned at the Pope's request, and 33 years after his crime, he visited Vatican City and laid flowers on the Pope's tomb. Ancient Romans were known to build tombs for their dogs and even gave them epitaphs to remember them by. One such inscription read, "I am in tears while carrying you to your last resting place, as much as I rejoiced when bringing you home with my own hands 15 years ago." Liviu Librescu was a Holocaust survivor who eventually became a professor at Virginia Tech. During the Virginia Tech shooting, he held the door of his classroom, sacrificing his life to save 22 of his 23 students while the shooter continuously shot through the door. This woman's husband and son died in a car crash while driving home from an Italian soccer match. She was invited to the next game to discover that all the players and staff were wearing shirts to honor them. In 2017, a 9 weeks pregnant Brazilian woman suffered a stroke and was declared legally dead. Although doctors said the babies had no hope for survival, the brain-dead woman was kept alive for 123 days before delivering a pair of healthy twins. You may remember when Bat Kid Miles Scott saved the city of San Francisco while battling leukemia in 2013. That same boy is now cancer-free. After a 2018 boating accident in Nigeria, a man named Blankson sacrificed his life to save 13 people. By the 14th trip, he was completely exhausted and ended up drowning, but he was the only fatality of the accident. In 2014, an Australian vet performed a 45-minute surgery on a goldfish named George. His owners were quite attached to him, so they paid to have a tumor removed from his head. After Basma Hamid was badly burned as a child, she eventually tattooed her own face to cover her scars. Now she helps other burn victims by tattooing their scars with pigments that match their skin color. A 10-year-old boy who was dying from cancer wanted to be buried in a casket made of Legos. Luckily, a local funeral home was able to make it happen using 26,000 Lego bricks. A man who suffered multiple strokes tried to teach his cat how to dial 911. Unsure if the training stuck, the man eventually fell from his wheelchair during a seizure. Police received a silent call from the house and arrived to find the man incapacitated with no one around except his cat. In the 1980s, actor Steve Buscemi was a New York City firefighter for 5 years. So when 9/11 happened, he showed up at his old firehouse the very next day to volunteer. For an entire week, he worked 12-hour shifts digging through rubble to find missing firefighters. After a bad cycling accident in 2009, UK man Dan Black became paralyzed from the waist down. So he spent the next 4 years raising $26,000 to pay for a stem cell treatment that might help him walk again. However, upon hearing about a disabled boy who needed a similar surgery but had a better chance of success, he donated all the money to him instead. These are some of the weirdest graves in the world. A grieving mother from Florida added a sandbox to the gravesite of her baby boy so that his big brother could play with him. This is the tomb of an 8-year-old boy who died of an incurable illness in 1865. A few days before he died, he told his father he was afraid of death because he didn't want to be buried in the dark. So his parents honored his wish and put a window in his tomb. This is the gravestone of Elijah Bond, the man who invented the Ouija board. After her daughter died of yellow fever in 1872, a heartbroken mother wanted to make sure that her little girl was never alone in times of need. Since the daughter was terrified of storms, her grave was constructed with a staircase that descends to her coffin. During thunderstorms, the mother would go to the graveyard and enter the tomb to comfort her child. Weird nature facts. Zookeepers in Argentina were quite shocked to find that Pelusa the polar bear had suddenly turned purple. But it turned out to simply be a reaction to the dermatitis medication she was taking, and she quickly became the biggest attraction at the zoo. Rainbow lattice sunstone is an extremely rare gemstone that occurs naturally. It can only be found in one tiny patch of desert in northern Australia. This chick was born with a genetic deformity that gave it 4 legs. If a flatworm's head is cut off, not only will it grow a new head and brain, but the new brain will contain all of the memories of the old brain. Sharks have survived 4 out of the 5 mass extinction events and have been around for more than 400 million years. This means they're older than Mount Everest, older than dinosaurs, and even older than trees. This is a photo of an alligator snapping turtle hibernating under a sheet of ice. Many turtles can survive this way by breathing in water through their butthole and diffusing the oxygen. Magnolia plants are so ancient that they're pollinated by beetles because they existed before bees even appeared. When eaten, the sarpa salpa can cause severe hallucinations lasting up to 36 hours. During the Roman Empire, the fish was commonly used as a party drug. Many cows have best friends and can become very stressed when they're separated from each other. Due to fresh water being so scarce on the Galapagos Islands, some bird species have adapted by drinking the blood of other animals. If a female fox dies, her mate will stay single forever. But if a male fox dies, his widow will search for a new mate immediately. Let's take a look at some of the greatest hoaxes ever pulled off. In 1979, billionaire Richard Branson released a hot air balloon shaped like a UFO over the streets of London. The next morning, local police forces were mobilized and even the army was alerted. When the balloon landed, Branson had also paid a little person to walk out dressed as E.T. In 1948, a man named Tony Signorini stomped around a beach in Florida wearing this pair of 30-pound lead shoes. For the next 40 years, he had locals convinced that a 15-foot-tall penguin was waddling around the area. On April 1st, 1975, residents of Sitka, Alaska woke up to the nearby dormant volcano blowing out black smoke. When a Coast Guard pilot went to investigate, he found 70 burning tires and the words April Fool spray painted into the snow.